Well folks, it's time to start tearing into the old Trail Boss here. February is kind of a slow season for me, February and March, and I got most of my work done here, so I figured it's time to start digging into some of my own projects. So today we're going to start pulling out these here transmissions. I'm going to pull out the right one first and get it onto the bench and split it open just to see what we're dealing with before I take the left one here out also. And I know that one's got the worst bands in it, so we're going to have to see what's in store on the inside of it. But everything's fairly simple to pull out. There's 4 bolts holding them in. You got the drive chain on one side and the chain coupler on the other side, and we should be able to lift them right out. So let's get to it. I'll start by getting these chain couplers off. Which somewhere down the line somebody must have either misplaced the pins or broke them, because they just got some mechanics wire running through the master link there, but whatever does the job at the time. And chain couplers off. The rod for the drive control, and then I just gotta do the 4 bolts underneath that hold the transmission on. I know 2 of them aren't going to be real easy to get to, but alright, bolts are all out down below, so see if we can lift this thing out of here. Actually, pretty stout little transmissions. So let's get this down to the garage where it's warm and we can split it open on the bench. I got the transmission clamped to the side of the lift table here so I can drain out all the fluid. It didn't look all too good. It had a lot of shiny metallic metal looking stuff, which is obviously enough and kind of expected because the bands were metal on metal. So right now, while we're going to let this thing drain for a bit and drip, I'm going to pull off the sprockets on each ends of the shafts here. I'm going to pull this one off here and that one, get this thing ready to split apart. Luckily enough, the seals were leaking on this, so everything stayed nice and oiled and didn't seize to the shaft. At least with this one. We'll have to see what the story is on the other one up there. Apparently this roll pin sheared from all the stress on the inside of here, because there's quite a bit of it when you're yanking on those levers. That doesn't seem too worn out. Hole in here is a little bit egged, but you guys probably can't see it. They also drilled another hole this way on the shaft, so I don't know if I can move this shaft 90 degrees on the inside so I get a fresh set of holes. That way it tightens everything up, but we'll have to see once we open it up. Alright, got all the bolts out from around the outside edge, so let's see if we can crack the case open. Now, I don't know which way that these adjusting screws go, so I just turned them the way I assumed that it would loosen the bands on the inside. Pretty good sized bands too. They almost look like they got lining left on them still. But they might be just glazed over from years of use. I don't know if you guys can see that, but you can see the lines going across it, and there's still a little bit on the edge. But they do look pretty well cooked. Kind of an odd design for pushing the bands. You can see it's got the paddles on each side, and as you twist it, the paddle will push it like so, and just push the side of the band up against the drum. These are actually aluminum too. Kind of surprised that they're still together. This band looks about the same as the other one. Still seems like it would be glazed over, so I think I can find these for sale online. There's a couple of 6x6 sites. Worst comes to worst, I'll see if I can get them relined, which shouldn't be too much of an issue, hopefully. Well, now that everything's pulled apart, everything looks fairly decent on the inside. These brass bushings inside of the case halves all look fairly good. You can see they all have grooves cut in them for the oil, so luckily enough I don't have to replace them and have those grooves recut. But everything has to get cleaned out. There's a lot of oil with the residue from the material on the clutch and the metal wearing off of the drums, and that's all going to get cleaned out. The planetary set, everything looks to be in fairly decent shape. The drums, if you hold a straight edge across them, there's probably maybe about 20 thousandths, 15 thousandths of a dip where it's worn in. Maybe not even that much. I didn't really measure it, just taking a while to guess. So I might see about having these things turned down just a little bit to clean them up. As for the carrier assembly for the planetaries, that pilot bushing down inside is worn, and as you can see it's a spline shaft that gets pressed into this fixture here. So I took the snap ring off, and I'm going to have to see about getting that pressed out. That way I can replace that pilot bushing, because I know that's worn, and that's where the other half of the shaft that sticks out sits inside of. So I want to make sure that's nice and tight. And as for the bands, like I said, they're very glazed. Just from being old, they're unbelievably glazed actually. There's no grip to them whatsoever anymore, so that's why this thing was slipping so bad. So I'm going to have to call the 6x6 place on Monday and see about bands, what the deal is with those, and I'm also going to get a hold of my clutch reline guy that I've been using and see if he'd be able to reline them and what the price would be for those, and just compare it and see what the deal is. But anyways, for the time being, I'm going to get all this stuff cleaned up with some paint thinner, get it all degreased and ready to go back together. That way when the bands are all squared away, we can reassemble. Well, after 7 months, I finally get to put the Trail Boss transmissions back together. I had the clutch bands relined earlier this spring. I had sent those out, had all 4 of them done, so those have a nice brand new lining on them. Whether it's, there we go, gonna focus. So they're not glazed or anything like they were before. Nice fresh lining. So that'll last for quite some time now. It wasn't a cheap endeavor to have those done. I think it was between $360 and $380 to have the 4 bands done, but the main thing is it's just taken care of and they'll be good for many years to come. So I do have 1 transmission left to put together. I did the other one this morning just to see how it went, and everything went together fairly well. This one I have to finish taking the surface rust off of some of the drums and the other parts because they were sitting in a cardboard box in the back corner of the shop there for the majority of this year, and they got a little bit damp from the humidity over the summer. I got to do that. I got to clean up some of the gasket surfaces on here. I also have to cut out my gasket because I stamped that out this morning, traced it with the oil, so that's got to get cut out. And I also ended up buying all new oil seals for both of these too, so they're gonna have fresh oil seals in them, fresh gaskets. And the last thing I'll have to do is pick up some grade 5 or grade 8 bolts, quarter 20s for these, because they only have grade 2 and I can feel them starting to pull when I tighten down, so I'd rather have the heavier bolts in there. But we're going to get this thing onto the bench. I'm going to start taking off this rust and we can see about assembling this transmission. I got the case halves and all the internal parts cleaned up and all the rust off of them from sitting. So last thing I have to do is just cut the gasket out here before I start reassembling. And for those of you who don't know how I make these gaskets, haven't watched me make them yet, what I end up doing is I take a large piece of gasket material and I'll take the case half and lay it face up and put a very thin layer of oil on the face of the case half where the gasket sets, and then I'll clamp it to it, and using the hammer I'll go around the edge like this just to push the oil into the sheet of gasket material to make the imprint. And it's a lot easier and a lot neater, I find, cutting them out like this than it is laying the piece of paper on the top of it and hammering out the gasket, because you can make nice round holes with punches and you can cut the outside and the inside out with scissors and make a nice edge to the gasket. First thing I'm going to do before I start reassembling here is I got a small rag and I refilled my pump oil can with ATF, because these transmissions take automatically transmission fluid instead of just regular oil or 30 weight or 10W30. So what I'm going to do, because I know these might be sitting for a while longer until I get to this Trail Boss restoration, so I'm going to just wipe the inside of these down with ATF. That way if for some reason moisture does get into them, just from the hot and cold weather that's going to be coming up soon with winter, I don't have to worry about them condensating and getting rusted on the inside. So I'll do this to the case halves, and I'm also going to do it to all the planetary sets on the inside, make sure they're all coated also. And now we can start reassembly on this. So the one thing I didn't do, which I think I mentioned back in February when I made the first half of this video, was I said the bushings inside of here were good. I did not replace the bushings inside of the planetaries, the pilot bushing inside. The shaft that's pressed in, that has the spline, did not want to press out very well, and I figured I'd just leave it the way it is for now. It's not like this thing's going to be getting ran all day, all week. So for what little play it has, I think it'll do just fine. So the first thing that goes in is the drum for the clutch. I don't know what side it is, but both of these case halves have different holes going through each side. So this has got the smaller diameter hole and bushing in it. So I put that side in first. Then you have to put your planetaries together and sort of drop them through as one unit, because it's a little bit easier. And these do have, you won't be able to see them, but they have little timing marks on them. They got little dots on one tooth on each gear. Whether it makes a lick of difference or not, whether they're lined up, I don't know, but that's how they're going to be again when it goes in, because I lined the other one up, so I might as well line this one up. The input shaft too, that goes in. This is the one that takes the centrifugal clutch coming off of the engine, slides onto here. If you're doing these, some of them are shimmed. I don't know if all of them are shimmed, but I've got two little shims that go on the end of that, so just be mindful of them and make sure they don't fall out on you. And then this just drops in as one piece. And that takes care of your center carrier with your orbital gears and all that for the planetary. And the next piece that goes on is going to be the other drum. Once again, don't know which one it's referred to as. Could be the forward or reverse. I don't know which is which. you have it. That's our planetary set. And now that those are in, we'll drop the clutches on, or at least the first one on, the lowermost one. That has to go in, and then the, guess it'll be the actuator for the clutches goes in here, and then I can tilt it up on the bench, put the last clutch on, and put the other case half on. There's really not that much to these transmissions. They're relatively simple. But before this clutch goes in, I'm going to have to soak it down with some oil, or the ATF, and fill up this clutch band with fluid, so that way it's not going on there dry. And they do take quite a bit of ATF also. You can see it soaking in. Transmission bands are all set with the ATF. I let them sit for a while and then put another coat on it, so everything's soaked in real nice. So I'm going to put the first one in here, and these have, one side has got a little, hopefully you can see it, there's a little notch on one side where the set screw sits to adjust your tension on the bands. The other side has got a long notch in it where, I'll just call them the actuators, these pieces sit right up top, and they'll push against the bands whenever you turn the rod on the top, which I will move the camera so you can see them. So that little notch has to go to this side over here because that's where the set screw goes in. So that'll drop on like so. And then I'm just going to thread the set screw in just a little bit until it gets to the inside of the case. So both bands are in here, and this is how the actuator goes in to move both of these bands. As you can see, there's two aluminum pieces with little legs that stick out of the bottom that push into the notched part of the band. On this side you're going to have the other small notch where the set screw sits, and that's going to ride up against the case. So whenever you twist or push the lever and it twists the arm on here, it would push that out like so. Obviously this would be up against the case, so it would tighten the band, and when you pull it back the other way, it does the same thing to this side, because as you can see, the farther you turn in the screw, as the band wears, the tighter it's going to make the band. So that's how you adjust either side, and there's one of these on either side of the case. So it's a pretty simple design. It's kind of neat, but the tricky part is getting this together, because you have to put the case together, and this band's going to want to move all the way in, so you have to shake it a little bit to get it to move back some to line up the set screw in the side of the case for the hole. So I'm going to get my gasket laid on here, my other case half, and we can see about slipping this together. Gasket is on our other half with our alignment pins, so now I can see about pressing this together. Now the trick is to look inside these holes and get that notch to line up with them. That way I can get the set screw in here and get it to fall into the notch and have it press up against the aluminum pieces on that rod. These also aren't very light transmissions either. These things got a little bit of heft to them. That's without a doubt. So that notch is lined up. And of course, now that this has been shaken around, I just want to pull this one out and make sure. and that's still in the same spot. So now I can put a couple of bolts in the side of this, and then I can put some vice grips on here gently and move it back and forth and make sure everything's shifting like it should be inside. So when everything is said and done here, as you can see, we are bumping up against the clutches. I don't remember what the adjustment was for the set screws in the book, so when it comes time to do that, I can go over it. But on the input shaft on this side, when you spin it, they should be adjusted so that way you can hold the output shaft from spinning and it'll still slip on the inside. And then once again, I don't remember which direction is which, but when you flip it one way, your output shaft spins one way. You flip it the other, it spins the other way. Because all it's doing is just grabbing either this drum or the other drum and then running it through the planetaries on the inside, because it actually reduces the revolutions from side to side, so you get a little bit of a gear reduction to them. And now the last thing to do is just get the seals pressed into this, and aside from the hardware, we'll be all set. Well, that takes care of this transmission. The last thing I have to do is just pick up some heavier grade hardware and I can finish bolting the case halves together, and this will be all squared away. And then depending on if I have some time in the next couple weeks while it's still warm enough, I might clean them up a little bit and prime them and paint them, because I do have some yellow spray paint kicking around here and I can get that taken care of so they'll be ready to go in. As for the rest of the Trail Boss itself, I don't know if I'm going to get to the project this year or not. I don't think it's going to be too bad to do, but I have a feeling it's going to take longer than what I expected, because if I haven't mentioned it already in the video or the previous one, the engine that's in it now, I do want to do an engine swap. I have an 18 horse Briggs & Stratton Vanguard V-twin that I want to swap into it and take out the two-stroke Kohler K295 engine because it's very worn out. But that also involves pulling out the subframe, cutting out the engine mounts, making new engine mounts, and so on and so forth. And all the roller chain has to be redone and has to be rewired, all new cables, and it's going to end up being a lot of work and probably a costly endeavor too. But for the time being, I did want to get these together, get this video out of my computer, being that it's been half made for the past couple months now, a few months, and that way these things are closed up and they won't be getting any more moisture and rust into them, and I can put them into storage. So until the rest of the project starts, folks, there you have it.